When I was 19 and considering dating a foreigner, my first worry was actually something rarely discussed openly: physical size differences. As a petite Filipina, this concern felt both personal and rooted in cultural stereotypes. For Western men interested in dating Filipinas, understanding our genuine fears beyond the usual stereotypes can transform your approach. These misunderstandings often create unnecessary barriers between cultures. Today I'm sharing the 7 real concerns that made me hesitate, including surprising cultural nuances like why mentioning Korean heritage might actually make some Filipinas feel more comfortable. These insights will help bridge understanding in cross-cultural relationships. Myth versus reality: physical size differences. The internet loves to laugh about height differences in Filipino-Western relationships. But behind those memes lies a genuine concern many Filipinas have when considering dating foreign men. I remember when I was 19, scrolling through dating profiles and feeling that flutter of anxiety whenever I saw height listed as 6 feet or taller. As someone standing at just 5'1", the prospect of dating someone more than a foot taller than me was about aesthetics and wondering if we'd physically fit together in the most basic ways. My first date with my 6'2" American boyfriend made this fear real. The hostess smirked when seating us, and throughout dinner, I struggled with eye contact without craning my neck. When we stood to leave, the top of my head barely reached his shoulders, and walking together highlighted our mismatched strides. He deliberately slowed while I practically jogged to keep pace. Our first hug goodbye found my face awkwardly pressed against his chest. Even holding hands felt unbalanced as his fingers completely engulfed mine, making me feel childlike beside him. These physical differences create practical challenges rarely discussed openly. Sharing an umbrella, dancing at events, and taking photos together all required thoughtful adjustments. Much like puzzle pieces from different sets, our bodies seemed designed for different spaces, yet somehow needed to fit together harmoniously. Western media has reinforced these concerns. Hollywood either plays height differences for laughs or presents them as problematic. Romantic comedies featuring tall men with petite women turn the height gap into jokes or awkward moments for audience entertainment. These portrayals often infantilize the shorter woman, casting her as helpless beside her larger partner. This physical concern runs deeper in Filipino culture than Westerners might expect. Traditional Filipino society emphasizes bagay, compatibility extending beyond personality to physical appearance. Family members comment on whether couples physically match. There's a cultural expectation that partners should complement each other physically, with significant differences sometimes facing scrutiny from older generations. Despite initial awkwardness, many Filipino-Western couples successfully navigate these differences over time. What begins as physical mismatch often evolves into comfortable rhythms as emotional connections deepen. My friend Josie, 4'11", has been happily married to her 6'3" Dutch husband for over 7 years. Their solutions include designating kitchen shelves each can reach comfortably, keeping a permanent step stool in their home, developing signals for when Josie needs a slower walking pace. Another couple, Jenny and Mark, addressed their height difference by finding activities that neutralized it. Swimming together, which eliminated awkward physical dynamics, focusing on seated activities like board games and movies, creating comfortable conversation positions at home. The awkwardness that feels overwhelming during early dating phases gradually fades as connection deepens. Physical differences that once seemed insurmountable become endearing characteristics rather than obstacles. Successful couples develop their unique dynamic through communication and adaptability. Whether it's a Filipino woman comfortably asking for help reaching high shelves, or a Western man learning to adjust his posture during conversations. Myth versus reality: the drug fear factor. While physical compatibility can be overcome through adaptation, there's a more profound fear that lingers beneath the surface for many Filipinas. Whenever I found myself on a first date with a foreigner at 19, I'd instinctively keep my drink within sight and sometimes even hold onto it during bathroom breaks. This wasn't random paranoia. It reflected a deeply ingrained safety concern that many young Filipinas share when dating across cultures. The fear of having drinks tampered with or being drugged during dates with foreigners is startlingly common among Filipinas. This concern persists despite most women never experiencing such incidents firsthand. Neither I nor most of my friends had ever encountered actual drink tampering, yet the fear influenced our dating behavior significantly. Have you ever wondered how media shapes our perception of dating safety across cultures? This apprehension stems from specific sources. Filipino households consume American crime shows, true crime documentaries, and news reports featuring stories about date rape drugs. Shows like CSI, Criminal Minds, and Law & Order SVU enjoy massive popularity in the Philippines, creating a media landscape where these dangers feel omnipresent. When combined with local news reports of trafficking, they create a powerful narrative about potential dangers foreign men might pose. These warnings become deeply personal when reinforced by family. I remember watching an episode of a crime show where a tourist drugged a local woman, shared Anna, a 22-year-old from Manila. After that, my mother insisted I only meet foreign dates in public places and never accept drinks I hadn't seen prepared. Such stories are remarkably common, highlighting why foreign men should be mindful of suggesting public meeting spots and respecting physical boundaries early in relationships. My limited dating experience at 19 amplified these safety concerns. With few previous relationships for comparison, I had no personal framework to assess whether certain behaviors were normal cultural differences or genuine red flags. This inexperience made it harder to distinguish between legitimate safety precautions and unfounded fears, especially in cross-cultural situations where social cues differ. Family warnings reinforce these anxieties. Be careful with those foreigners, my aunt would caution. They think Filipino women are easy. Many Filipino parents explicitly warn their daughters about the supposed dangers of dating foreigners, creating an atmosphere where caution overrides curiosity. The perceived economic advantage many foreign men have in the Philippines creates an uneven relationship foundation that can amplify safety concerns. Young Filipinas often worry that refusing requests might lead to conflict, making them vigilant about maintaining control from the beginning. Statistics rarely support the perception of widespread danger. The fear significantly outpaces the actual risk, yet remains a genuine emotional barrier for many young Filipinas. For foreign men dating in the Philippines, understanding this fear provides valuable insight. As relationship coach Alma advises, foreigners should allow the Filipina to set the pace and direction of the interaction. This approach gives Filipinas the sense of control they need to feel safe. When my now husband and I had our first date, he suggested a busy cafe in the middle of the day. He arrived early, chose a visible table, and never left his seat when I stepped away. These simple actions communicated his understanding of my concerns without requiring an awkward conversation about safety fears. The most effective way to address this fear is through consistent behaviors that demonstrate awareness and respect, establishing the foundation of trust necessary to overcome these concerns. Myth versus reality. The hidden wife scenario. Transparency about intentions builds trust, but what about transparency about the past? Imagine investing your heart, time, and emotions into someone only to discover they have a wife, or worse, multiple families scattered across different countries. This nightmare scenario haunts many Filipinas considering relationships with foreigners, turning casual conversations into careful investigations. When a Filipina asks where you've traveled in the Philippines or how long you've stayed, she's conducting an invisible background check. These calculated questions help uncover your history without directly asking if you're married. The frequency of your visits, the regions you've explored, and the hotels you've stayed in become puzzle pieces in her assessment of your truthfulness. Take Jasmine's experience when dating an Australian man who claimed to be divorced. He mentioned visiting the Philippines 3 times before, but was vague about where he stayed each time, she explains. When I asked if he'd visited my hometown, he changed the subject quickly. That was my first red flag. Her subtle questioning eventually led to the discovery of his Filipino ex-girlfriend in another province, and their 2 children he hadn't mentioned. Questions like, have you been to Cebu before, help determine if you have connections in that region. How many times have you visited the Philippines? Establishes a pattern of your presence in the country. These inquiries reveal whether your story adds up or if there are suspicious gaps indicating hidden relationships. This caution stems from very real concerns. Stories circulate widely throughout Filipino communities about foreigners maintaining multiple families across different countries or islands within the Philippines. These are cautionary tales passed between friends and family members, often with specific names and locations attached. The emotional and economic stakes are extraordinarily high for Filipinas in these situations. Relationships with foreigners often involve significant life decisions like leaving jobs, moving away from family, or relocating abroad. Discovering she's the other woman means potential financial devastation, social humiliation, and years of emotional recovery. Social media has provided additional tools for verification. That casual scrolling through your Instagram might actually be digital detective work, looking for inconsistencies or evidence of other relationships. The language barriers in cross-cultural relationships make this situation even more complex. Nuanced conversations about past relationships become challenging when operating in a second language. Misunderstandings about terms like separated, divorced, or what constitutes a serious relationship create confusion. Cultural differences in discussing previous partners create information gaps that breed uncertainty. For foreigners seeking honest relationships, this might feel uncomfortable, as if you're being secretly investigated. Understanding that this fear comes from self-protection rather than inherent distrust can transform your approach. The solution is straightforward. Be proactively transparent about your past. Offer clear details about previous visits. Volunteer information about your relationship history before being asked. Share photos of family members, and introduce her to long-term friends. Being forthcoming about your living situation builds the foundation of trust needed. By openly addressing these concerns yourself, you demonstrate respect for her caution, while creating the emotional safety necessary for your relationship to grow. This proactive transparency doesn't just resolve her fears. It creates the solid foundation of trust you'll both need to navigate other challenges together. Myth versus reality. The gossip concern. Trust in a relationship requires transparency, but what happens when the entire community becomes an unwelcome participant in your romance? In Filipino culture, there's a hidden battlefield every couple must navigate, one where whispered words can damage reputations and family relationships. The real threat isn't whether your Filipino partner trusts you, but who else is watching. When I was 19, I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder whenever I was with a foreign boyfriend. It wasn't because I was embarrassed by him. It was because I dreaded the inevitable text messages from distant relatives or coworkers. I saw you with that American at SM Mall yesterday. Are you dating now? Does your mother know? This vigilance stems from Haya, a complex blend of shame, embarrassment, and social propriety governing Filipino social interaction. In smaller communities where everyone connects through minimal degrees of separation, relationships become community property, subject to collective judgment rather than personal choice. My experience with an Australian colleague illustrates this perfectly. Despite our mutual attraction and engaging conversations, I declined his lunch invitations because accepting would transform my professional identity into fodder for gossip. The administrative staff had already nicknamed him Jessica's foreigner after just 2 reception visits. By the 3rd week, coworkers saying Jessica's got a boyfriend whenever he appeared. Each teasing comment felt like a small erosion of my workplace reputation, turning what should have been a private connection into a public spectacle where I performed under the unforgiving spotlight of collective scrutiny. The consequences of such gossip extend beyond momentary embarrassment. A college roommate's parents threatened to withdraw her from university after a church member reported seeing her holding hands with an American exchange student. My friend faced workplace harassment when photos with her European boyfriend circulated, prompting male coworkers to question her values simply because she dated a foreigner. Social media amplifies this pressure. A single tagged restaurant photo can reach family within minutes, triggering interrogations about intentions and propriety. Mixed couples face additional challenges through their visibility. In a country where most share similar physical characteristics, Filipino-foreign couples immediately stand out, making even grocery shopping an exercise in public examination. This explains why many Filipinas suggest secluded restaurants or malls distant from their neighborhoods. My sister would travel to different cities just to have dinner with her Canadian boyfriend, now husband, without encountering acquaintances. This boundary setting becomes essential in a culture where community involvement often overrides personal privacy. I developed practical adaptations, meeting at private establishments, minimizing public affection, and carefully controlling information flow about my relationship. These weren't signs of shame, but strategic responses in a culture where reputation remains valuable social currency. For foreigners dating Filipinas, understanding this dynamic is crucial. When she suggests meeting somewhere private, she's protecting something more vulnerable than her heart, her standing in a community where judgments have lasting consequences. When she hesitates to post your pictures online, she's managing how her social circle learns about your relationship. What might seem like excessive privacy to Western sensibilities represents thoughtful navigation of complex social terrain. The most successful cross-cultural relationships acknowledge this reality rather than fighting against it. Myth versus reality. Relationship acceleration fears. Relationship stability takes time to build, but time is precisely what many international couples lack. When a foreigner mentions marriage after just 3 months of dating, it's rarely just about love. It's about visa requirements, creating artificial deadlines that force relationships into hyperspeed. These bureaucratic constraints often leave young Filipinas caught in an impossible position between opportunity and authenticity. The visa clock imposes deadlines disconnected from the natural progression of feelings. Traditional Filipino courtship values measured progression, like a crock-pot that slowly develops rich flavors over time. Western dating often operates more like a microwave, quick, efficient, focused on results. Unlike local relationships where couples can take years to decide on marriage, international couples face government-mandated timelines that compress relationship milestones into unnaturally short periods. For many Filipinas, particularly younger ones, this acceleration triggers profound anxiety. The traditional approach emphasizes getting to know each other thoroughly, building trust, and involving family before making significant commitments. When foreigners arrive with different expectations about relationship pacing, the resulting misalignment can feel overwhelming. I've witnessed countless relationships struggle with this timing mismatch. One friend described her experience with an American businessman who proposed after just 2 months together. What should have been romantic instead triggered panic. Not because she didn't care for him, but because she hadn't had sufficient time to evaluate this life-altering decision. The visa expiration date was dictating their relationship timeline. A recent survey of Filipino Western couples revealed that relationships rushed due to visa constraints were 60% more likely to experience serious adjustment problems within the first year of marriage, compared to those who found ways to extend their courtship period. This acceleration fear intensifies when considering what's at stake. For a Filipina, accepting a proposal often means contemplating leaving behind her entire support network, family, friends, and cultural familiarity. Age differences, common in these relationships, further complicate timing expectations. Older foreign partners may feel greater urgency to settle down, while younger Filipinas might still be discovering their own identities. The most authentic relationships acknowledge this dynamic rather than fighting against it. As one woman advised, the plane needs to get enough speed on the runway before it can take off without crashing. So go slow. It's a crockpot, not a microwave. Foreigners hoping to build genuine relationships with Filipinas should consider initially presenting their stay as temporary, allowing the relationship to develop without immediate pressure. Then, as connection deepens and the Filipina shows interest in continuing, they can discuss future plans and demonstrate commitment. This measured approach addresses fundamental fears many young Filipinas express about rushing into major commitments. Their boundaries reflect a desire to ensure decisions emerge from genuine connection rather than administrative convenience. For those navigating cross-cultural relationships now, consider creating a relationship timeline together that balances visa requirements with emotional readiness. This simple act of collaborative planning acknowledges the bureaucratic reality, while creating space for authentic connection to develop at a pace that respects both partners' comfort levels. Myth versus reality. Disrespect and abuse concerns. Behind the smiles in those vacation photos and romantic social media posts lies a paradox many Filipinas struggle with. The hope that a foreign partner will be more respectful than local options, paired with the fear that cultural differences might actually enable more subtle forms of disrespect. This internal conflict creates a complex emotional landscape for young Filipinas considering relationships with foreigners. When I was 19, my newsfeed was filled with stories about Filipinas in distressing situations with foreign partners. Local news outlets regularly featured exposés about abandoned women, cultural disrespect, and even abuse. These stories became cautionary tales passed around at family gatherings, reinforced by dramatic portrayals in movies and television. Every negative headline added another layer of apprehension, making me hypersensitive to potential warning signs when interacting with foreigners. This media backdrop affects even the most confident young women. My friend Elena, who studied international relations and spoke 3 languages, still found herself watching for red flags when dating an American businessman. He seemed perfectly respectful, she told me, but I couldn't stop analyzing his reactions whenever I mentioned my family obligations or Filipino traditions. I saw the worry in her eyes, the fear that one day he might reveal contempt for what she held dear. The fear becomes particularly complex when intertwined with power imbalances in cross-cultural relationships. Economic disparities can create dependency that complicates leaving difficult situations. A college classmate stayed in a relationship where her cultural practices were routinely mocked because her partner covered her university tuition. The financial support came with an unspoken expectation that she would adapt to his cultural norms, not the other way around. Physical differences and communication challenges also factor into this dynamic. Casual dismissals of cultural practices might be misinterpreted as simple curiosity. My cousin dated a European man for 6 months before realizing his jokes about Filipino family gatherings weren't cultural misunderstandings, but actual contempt. I couldn't tell if he was being disrespectful or if I was being oversensitive, she explained. By the time I realized it was the former, I had already introduced him to my entire extended family and felt trapped. Her experience highlights how cultural and language differences can mask warning signs that would be obvious in same-culture relationships. What's rarely discussed is how these concerns center particularly on family dynamics. In Filipino culture, disrespect toward family can be more devastating than personal disrespect. When Diane's American boyfriend refused to participate in her grandfather's birthday celebration, calling the traditional food weird and the family gathering chaotic, it struck at the core of her cultural identity. These fears aren't always justified. Many intercultural relationships thrive precisely because both partners approach cultural differences with genuine respect. My friend Maricel and her Canadian husband built their relationship on mutual cultural exchange, where her traditions weren't treated as exotic curiosities, but as meaningful practices to be understood and honored. The most successful cross-cultural relationships I've witnessed are those where the foreign partner understands that respect for Filipino family connections isn't optional, it's fundamental. When my now husband spent 3 hours in conversation with my father before asking me on our second date, he was demonstrating an understanding that in Filipino culture, relationships extend beyond 2 individuals to encompass family networks and community ties. Myth versus reality. The abandonment fear. While family respect creates a foundation for trust, there's a deeper historical wound that continues to affect cross-cultural relationships in the Philippines today. The shadow of the Malaysian children left behind after World War II is a living cultural memory that shapes how many Filipinas approach relationships with foreigners. Thousands of children grew up fatherless when American servicemen departed, creating a legacy of abandonment that resonates across generations. This collective trauma manifests as a very real fear when a young Filipina considers opening her heart to someone from another country. At 19, I remember sitting with my cousin as she whispered her deepest fear about her American boyfriend. What if I get pregnant and he disappears back to California? The question was grounded in stories we'd both heard since childhood. Her worry revealed something fundamental about dating across cultures in the Philippines. Behind every budding romance lurks the question of permanence. The transient nature of most foreigners' presence in the Philippines creates an unavoidable relationship challenge. When someone you're developing feelings for is only visiting for a few weeks at a time, the question of what happens next becomes unavoidable. This limited time frame makes it nearly impossible to fully assess someone's character and intentions. Many Filipinas build emotional barriers as protection, creating distance that can prevent genuine connection during those crucial early stages. Lucia, who met her Canadian boyfriend while he was on a 3-month business assignment in Manila, described the anxiety that settled in as his departure date approached. Every day, I felt our connection growing stronger, but also felt the countdown clock ticking louder. I started holding back emotionally because I couldn't bear the thought of fully investing in someone who might never return. The economic disparities between most foreigners and Filipinas add another layer of uncertainty. When a man from a wealthier country pursues a relationship with a Filipina, questions about motivation naturally arise from the woman herself and her entire social circle. Is he genuinely interested in building a life together, or is this simply an extended vacation romance? This uncertainty creates a perpetual state of emotional guardedness. Dr. Santos, who counsels international couples in Manila, explains that many Filipinas develop attachment styles that appear contradictory, deeply committed to family connections, while simultaneously maintaining emotional barriers with romantic partners from other countries. This isn't manipulation, it's self-preservation. Successful cross-cultural couples overcome this fear through consistent reliability. Ricardo, who married his Filipino wife after meeting her during a business trip, credits their success to transparent communication about future plans. I made sure she knew exactly when I was coming back before I ever left. I never made promises I couldn't keep. Eventually, she realized that when I said I would do something, I actually did it. Today's couples leverage technology to diminish these historical fears. Video calls, shared calendars showing future visits, and virtual family introductions help establish a sense of integration between visits. Tools unavailable to previous generations facing similar fears. Managing expectations honestly from the beginning builds the foundation for trust. Foreign partners who are transparent about their intentions, provide realistic timelines, and demonstrate commitment through consistent actions effectively address the deep-rooted fear of abandonment that echoes through Filipino cultural memory. So we've explored these 7 fears that shape how young Filipinas approach relationships with foreigners. What's crucial to understand is that these concerns represent genuine anxieties about safety, respect, and long-term stability. As Alma explained, these fears influence cross-cultural dating experiences. Successful partners demonstrate genuine character through consistent actions, not words. They show cultural sensitivity rather than dismissing concerns. They prioritize trust building over immediate gratification. By acknowledging these fears and responding with patience and respect, you create space for authentic connection. Consider how might you demonstrate trustworthiness in your approach. This understanding transforms potentially superficial encounters into relationships founded on mutual respect and genuine care.